An object in JavaScript is anything that takes a specific key and maps it to a specific value. If you're familiar with dictionaries in Python, it's the same thing. The way we can declare an object is we can say const person equals curly brackets, and then we have to give a key. So in this case, we can say name, colon, and then give a value. So name, we could say, is Alice. Then if we want to access that name, we can console.log person.name. Run this, run objects.js, and we get Alice. So this is representing different types of data than you would in an array. It's just, a very flexible structure, and it's used all over the place within JavaScript. The keys and values can be anything. They don't just have to be strings. So for instance, we could have age could map to a number, and you could even map to more complicated nested objects, which we will get to in a bit. It's typical that you'll have all of your keys be camel case. However, it is possible to have any string as a key. If I wanted to have a favorite color as a key, that could map to red. And then if I have some string that has spaces in it, I can access it by saying console.log person favorite color. And we can get Alice and red. However, this is never something you want to do, so just don't do it. Just do like that, much better. And then you say person dot favorite color. Also, it's important to note that even though you declare an object as a constant, all that means is it's referring to the same actual data structure. We couldn't reassign this to some other object or to a number, but we can add keys to it after the fact. So what we could say is we could say person dot height equals 170 centimeters or something like that, and then get that value, say console.log person dot height, and we can then run this. There we go. So we get our 170. Normally you don't want to do this. Normally you want to define all of the keys you're going to have at the start. However, it is something that you can do if need be. As mentioned earlier, you can also nest objects within other objects, and you can nest arrays within objects. For example, we could have a more complicated student object. Student, they could have a name, so could be Bob, and then they could have, we'll just say demographics, which could be an object within itself. They could have I don't know, a race, could be Hispanic, and then they could have a sex, which could be male or something like that. And you can also map to arrays, so you could have classes equals art, math, and history, something like that. Then if we are accessing this nested object, all we would have to do is we could say student dot demographics dot sex. So we could console.log this. right? And then that would be male is what it would say. There we go. Also, you know, if we were going to do an array access, right, similar to before, we could just say student.class is 0, and this would say art. Another important thing is that this is not the only way to access values within an object. You can imagine that what we could have is we could have multiple students. So we could say student 1, student 2, just rename this Charlie. And it might get a little bit cumbersome to say, okay, student1.name, student2.name. Instead, what we can do is you could say const name equals student1. And this will give you the name property from student1, such that later, if you're trying to write some code using this name, you can just console.log name instead of having to say console.log student1.name. Right, so can do that. Right, we've got Bob and Bob. Final point here, as you can imagine, if we have multiple objects of similar structure, they might have some overlapping key names, and we can't have two constants with the same, you know, we need to differentiate these somehow. So we can't just say const name equals student2, because then we're gonna have name and name. What you can do is you can destructure the name property, that's what this is called, and then rename it once it is destructured. So we could rename it name1, destructure name, and then name it name2, like so. And we could log these. Name1, name2. And we've got Bob and Charlie.